Okay, so it looks like we've got everyone that's going to join. Thank you guys for hopping on to the webinar. So just to kind of give you an overview of how we're going to format this webinar, I'll just go through kind of the basic setup. So that is to say, creating cultivation batches from mother, and then printing batch tags, destroying plantings, and then we'll go through the entire kind of cultivation process. So moving plants from immature to veg, what the tagging process kind of looks like, and then into flowering, and then eventually harvest. I'm going to have you guys on mute for the duration of the webinar, and then we'll save about 10 or 15 minutes towards the end for questions. So as I'm going through it, just kind of make note of questions that you have. You can either post them in the Q&A or just write them down on your side, and I'll answer them again in that Q&A section at the end. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started then. So just for some context, I've got some mothers already set up in my demo account here. So what we're going to be going through is creating a batch of immature plants from one of those mothers. And then again, we'll take that through the entire process, go through printing, updating growth phases, and then harvest those plants that we're going to create. So we'll start here in our active plant batches section. So under plants, plant batches, and active, that's where we're at now. And we're going to go to actions and then create batch. So it's going to give us a couple options here. As I said before, I've got some mothers set up. So the two options here are cloner seed and mother. So the difference there, cloner seed is if you're creating a plant batch for the first time that may not have a source, a mother source. Maybe they came in from another facility, or they're just being created as like beginning inventory. That's when you would use that cloner seed option. The mother option, which we'll use today, is going to be looking for a Canix mother plant tag. So as I said before, I've already got one set up here. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that here. So this is going to be the process for, again, taking cuttings from your mothers that you may have in your facility. So I'll go ahead and paste that in here. So I've got my Dream Queen here. So 038 is going to be my mother plant tag source. Now, this batch tag field, this is automatically populated by Canix, and you'll see different variations of this field. So batch tag or plant tag that Canix is going to automatically populate based on the last tag that was used. So in this case, we're using 0196 because the last tag that was used was 0195. And then we'll choose clone as the batch type. And then we'll indicate what location that's in. So we'll just put these in Area 51. And we'll select the strain here. So the location and the strain fields you're seeing here, these are set up in that facility data section under admin of your Canix platform. So these are user-generated locations and strains. You create them in facility data, and you'll see those in the drop-downs throughout the platform. Anytime you see a location or a strain field, you'll see in the drop-down what you've already created. So in this case, we'll go ahead and say that we managed to get 100 cuttings off of this particular mother. And the planted date, you'll see planted date, package date. Anytime you see a date field in Canix, it's going to default to today's date. You can always update this. So say you're getting caught up from the past couple of days worth of actions that you've done within your facility. You're catching up in Canix. You can always backdate to make sure that your data is as accurate as possible. So go ahead and leave that for today. And then once I have all this information entered, I can go ahead and create the plant batch. So once I do that, it's going to bring us back to our active plant batches menu. And I can kind of talk through what this screen is meant to do. So let's let that load here. So the active plant batches, this is going to be an overview of all of your plants that you have in the system by batch. So it's going to show you within each batch. So in some cases, you may have some immature plants in a batch. Some may be ready to move into veg. And we have different columns to indicate where those particular plant counts are. So in this case, let me go ahead and type in my plant batch that I just created. So there's a few options here. We can search either by the tag number or by the strain or the room/location. So it really depends on kind of what you're looking for and how you want to find that information. So you can see here, we've got a few different plant batches of the Dream Queen. So we've got that, our plant batch that we just created. And from here, there's a few options that we can do. So with these 100 plants, these 100 immature clones, just to kind of clarify here too, this 0196 tag number, this is representing all 100 plants within this batch. So what may be necessary is if all 100 of those plants are not in the same kind of general area, you may need to print off different labels. So when Metric comes online, you guys will have individual tags that will be associated with a specific plant batch or a specific plant. And it's only one physical tag per tag number. So with Canix, you can print off multiple tags of multiple copies of the same tag, which again may come in handy with a plant batch this size. You may split it up into groupings of 50 or 25, which may require those supplemental labels to be printed off. So in that case, what we can do here with this 0196, we can go ahead and select that and open up our actions menu here on the top right and click print label. So that's going to open up a new tab to our custom labels module. And there's quite a few options here as far as customization. So it really depends on what kind of information you want to show on these plant batch labels or plant labels or package labels. So there's a few different things you can do to customize those labels. So we'll let that open up. In the meantime, in addition to being able to print the labels directly from active plant batches, in most cases, every clone or every cutting in a batch is not going to make it, unfortunately. So in that case, what we can do here, we want to make sure that we record any time that a plant is destroyed or we create waste from it, any kind of action, any kind of physical action that's taken on a plant or a plant batch, we want to make sure that we record that action in Canix. So in this case, for these Dream Queen, so maybe they've been on the ground for a few days, for a couple of weeks, we're ready to move them into veg. Before we do that, we want to make sure that we get rid of any that we need to, that aren't going to make it, that haven't thrived. So I've got that plant batch selected. I can go back up here to actions and then select destroy plantings. So this is where I'm going to update that plant count based on the ones that I've destroyed. So you can see here, we've got our plant batch summary on the right, and we can enter the reason that we're going to get rid of those plants. So in this case, we can say failure to thrive. Destroy that date, we can leave that as today. And we're going to just get rid of, let's say 10 of those, they didn't make it. So that's going to leave us with 90 in this plant batch. So once I have that information filled out, I can go ahead and click submit. And that's going to bring us back to our active plant batches screen, where it's going to show that updated number. So a total of 95 or 90 left in that plant batch. So let me pull that up here. 0196 is our batch number. And now we'll see in our inventory field, we have a total of 90 left. So a couple other things here to point out. You'll see this grid format everywhere in Canix, whether you're creating new packages, you're looking at your plants, your sales orders. We have different columns for different data points. And with these columns, you can actually rearrange these to highlight the information or make more clear the information that you find important, that's important to your operation. So maybe we want to move the source mother plant over to the left, rearrange the immature veg and flowering columns, we can do that. And we can also get rid of specific columns that aren't important to us as well. So we can get rid of like packaged or any notes. If we don't utilize the notes function, we can get rid of that just to kind of clean up the platform a little bit. So jumping back over to our labels, we have our plant batch here. So we're going to open up our print labels function, which we loaded earlier. And you can see here, there's quite a few options. So there's a couple ways to do this. We can either select from an existing template. So in this case, I can select plant batch. And that's a user generated template, a user created template that I can select from and pull in the data associated with that specific template. So you can see I've already got that set up with the barcode, the tag number, the strain name as well. In addition, I can create my own template. So I can start from scratch, or I can use an existing template and adjust it and edit that as needed. So in this case, within each of these elements on the label itself, you can increase or decrease the size depending on, visibility, or again, kind of the format of the label itself. We can also increase and decrease the width of the barcode itself to make it easier to scan if needed. Add in that QR code, and then again, rearrange really any of these elements on the label itself. And then on the left here, you can see you can add in different data points. So the mother plant that it came from, the facility address, the warning symbol if needed. And then you can also add your own text fields. So if there's a data point that's missing here, definitely reach out and let us know. We can see about adding that. Or if it's a dynamic field, you can always just add a new text field and input that information manually onto the label. There are a few different tag types. So obviously the information related to a plant batch versus a plant versus a package is going to be different. So that's why we have split those up into different tag types. So if we look at plant, you can see a few different pieces of information here: the flowering date, the vegetative date, the planted date, right? A few different options here as far as customization for that plant tag type. And so the idea here is that you can create different templates for each of those tag types. For packages, you may have a bulk package template, a unit package template. You may have a couple different plant batch templates or plant templates as well. Okay, in addition to that, you can also, in addition to actually adjusting elements of the label itself, you can also adjust the label dimensions specific to the printer and the label size that you're using. So if you're using bigger labels, you can adjust that here. And obviously that's going to provide you with more room on the label itself to put these data points on. Okay, so let's jump back over here to our active plant batches. So as I was saying before, so we've gone through creating the plant batch from a mother. So we've got the source mother plant here as well, indicated on the plant batch itself. And now what we can do is actually move these into the vegetative phase. So from here, I can go ahead and select, as I did before, and go to our actions menu and select update growth phase. And one thing I want to point out as well, actually, before we do that, for most of these actions within the menu, you can select as many plant batches as you want. So if you're updating the growth phase for multiple plant batches within one room, you can select each of those plant batches from the active plant batches menu and update those all at once. So let me show you an example here. So let's choose this test batch and then also our Dream Queen that we just created. So we can select both of those. And you'll see as I filter, we're going to see the actual filters that I'm applying and then the rows that are selected. So you can see the 2 rows selected here. And then within the actions menu, you can see the number in parentheses here is updated based on the entries that I've selected. So in this case, I can move both of those at the same time, and you can see them both here. And this is where those individual tags kind of come into play that I mentioned earlier. So up to this point, each of these batches has been represented by this one batch tag, either a number or a name, depending on what's required. So again, those are represented by those tags. Now that they're being moved into vegetative, this is when they're going to be actually tagged individually as well. So they'll still be represented by that batch tag, but now they're going to have their own individual tags as well. So that way we can move them individually. You can also make changes at the batch level, like create plant waste, things like that. And within each of these, we can select what number of plants we want to move over. So let's say, for instance, this Dream Queen that we have, we're going to update all 90 of those. We can update the location as well. So from here, maybe it goes into a veg room or it stays in the room it's in. Maybe you have a clone/veg room and it's just going to stay here. You can leave that as it is or update it to another specific location. And you can see here, speaking on the unique tags, we're just going to start out with a plant tag, a starting plant tag. So this is going in sequence. So the one we created before was 0196. Now we're picking it up at 0197. And then we're going to apply in sequence based on the number of tags we're updating each one of those individual tags, just going up in sequence. So now for these test batch, let's say we're only going to send over 60 of those. 40 still need a few more days before we actually move them over. So we can go ahead and save that. Now you can see the tag numbers have been updated, and then the amount to update is updated as well. So we'll move 60 of these over to veg, and we'll retain 40 in the immature phase. Okay, so once all this information is filled out, all of it's correct and accurate, we can go ahead and click submit. Actually, let's get rid of that one. Oh, it looks like I've already got a tag number, some tags associated with those. So let's update this to 20. So we'll move over 20 of those, just as an example. Okay, so we'll just move over 20 of those immature plants into veg. And now we'll see those numbers reflected on our active plant batches screen. So for that 0196, we should have a total of 70 left in immature, and then 20 that we moved over to veg. So let's take a look there. Okay, so a total of 70 there, and then 20 into veg. So now at this point, we can see that our active plant batches has been updated. So now if we go into vegetative and tracked, we'll be able to see those individual tags related to that Dream Queen batch, those Dream Queen plants that we just moved over. So this is where the column filters come in handy. So either, again, filtering by the tag number itself, the strain name, or the room or plant batch. So you can apply as many of these filters as you want to kind of narrow down on exactly what you're looking for. So let's take this strain filter, for instance. We'll go ahead and select Dream Queen as the filter there. And then we can also filter on the room. So it looks like all of these are in Area 51 anyway, so we don't need to use that. But then let's go ahead and filter on the plant batch so that way we can see just our 20 vegetative plants. So you can see we're filtered on a total of 27. We really just need to see those 20 that we created. So we can filter on that plant batch. Perfect. So now you can see we have a total of 20 plants, and these are the 20 that we had just moved over. Okay. So when we first started, I mentioned that I already had some mother plants added, indicated, tagged as mothers. And let me show you how to actually do that. So the drop down that we saw whenever creating that plant batch, the mother plant tags, it's only going to show us plants in that drop down that have been marked as mothers. So here in tracked vegetative plants, we can select 2 or 3 of the biggest veg plants that we want to actually turn into mothers. We can select those here, go to actions, and then toggle to mother. And that's going to be the trigger to populate those in that mother plant dropdown in that create batch function. So we're only going to see those plant tags that have been marked as mothers in that dropdown. So that way you can track, I have all these veg plants, these 2 are mothers. We can see that here in Canix. So you can see here we've got that checkbox there indicating that those 2 are mothers. Okay, so a couple other things you can do here. You can also destroy plants in the vegetative phase. So maybe, they got some mites or something like that. You need to get rid of those. You just select those specific plants, destroy. You can also move to flowering, which we'll do in just a second. And then you can also create plant waste. So creating plant waste, when it comes to vegetative or flowering plants, sometimes you may have, you go through and prune a specific location, a specific room. You want to make sure that you track all of that waste. So in order to do that, you would filter on, again, either the room or the strain itself, just as a cumulative total. Here's the total waste that I got for all of these plants. You would select those plants here, go to actions, and then create plant waste for those. So just as an example, let's choose these 3 plants. We go to actions and then create plant waste. And it's going to populate those tags in our menu here. And then we can just, again, create a cumulative total related to the plant waste that was taken from those 3 plants. So in this case, we can say, disposal method, we self-hauled it. Total waste weight is, let's say, 100 grams. Waste reason, let's say contamination as an example. Again, the calendar, anytime you see a calendar or a date field, it's going to default to today. You can enter in any mixed materials. So in some cases, in some states, you're required to mix it with fertilizer or something else to make that product unusable. So you can enter that here as well. And you can see once I enter that information, it's just going to apply the reason, the disposal method, and the waste entry date for each of those plants. And I can submit that and record that waste. Okay, so we've got those veg plants. We've created waste from them. We have a couple mothers pulled out for those specific plants. So now let's go ahead and move those over to flowering. Get them ready for harvest. So same thing we did before. We're here in tracked vegetative plants. So let's go ahead and filter on the plant batch and pull up those 20 plants. Okay, so in this menu, let's go ahead and move all of these to flowering. So the best way to select all or select multiple entries at one time is going to be a keyboard shortcut. So I'll select the first entry here and then hold the shift key on my keyboard and then scroll down to the last one that I want to select and select that. You can see it's going to select all those in the sequence. Now that we have that, we can go to actions and move the plants to flowering. So it's just going to have a pop-up menu here where, again, it populates the flowering date. It's going to default to today. And then we can select the room that we want to move it into. So in this case, let's move it into flower 1. Okay. Then you can see a total of 18 plants that we are moving. Flowering date, new room, and we'll go ahead and update the growth phase there. Okay. Now that that's done, so again, most of any actions that you are doing in Canix, you just want to make sure that you're recording in Canix either the day of or the day after, as soon as possible, after that physical action has been taken in your facility. So now that we move those into flowering, we should be able to find them in our flowering module. And one thing I want to point out as well, we started out by creating that immature plant batch. The tag numbers, the tag for each of those batches was representing all the plants within that batch. Once they move into veg, they get tagged with those individual tags as well. And those tags that they're going to be tagged with will follow them into flowering and then into harvest as well. So it's really just that one batch tag and then the individual plant tags associated with those. Okay, so now we're here in tracked flowering plants. So just like before, we'll use the column filters to actually filter out the plants that we want to work on. So you can see we have a total of 18 here. So same thing as before. We can select multiple plants, create plant waste from those. What typically happens in the flowering phase is especially right before harvest, maybe there's some pre-harvest plant maintenance that you perform. So you prune off, the large leaves, things like that. This would be a good opportunity to record that waste. So you select the plants either by strain or by room. Select those specific plants and go through the waste workflow that we went through just a second ago. So entering the reason, the total weight, and then applying that to all those plants. Okay, so let's go ahead and harvest these flowering plants. So you can, one piece of context I want to cover as well, everything that we're going through today, it may seem like a lot to kind of do, but keep in mind that these actions are going to happen infrequently. So you're going to create the plant batch. So one day, those plants are going to just live in that room and have that reflected in Canix. And then once they're ready to move to veg, come into Canix, record that action, and same with when they're going into flowering and then into harvest. Okay, so with these tracked flowering plants, we'll go ahead and get these ready for harvest. So we're going to create a harvest batch. So in this case, I can just filter on the plants that I want to harvest, go to actions, and then harvest filtered plants. Now, one thing I want to point out as well here, I don't think it's been confirmed if there's going to be a limit on the number of plants within a batch once Metric comes online. I can tell you in California and other states, there is a limit to the number of plants within a plant batch. In California specifically, you're limited to 100 plants per batch. So just like we did before, creating that immature plant batch of 100, that most likely will be the limit. Now, whenever we're harvesting, so say you have 300 Dream Queen plants, so that's 3 batches of 100 each that are planted at the same time. They're most likely going to be harvested at the same time as well. So even though you can only have 100 plants in a plant batch, so 3 batches of 100, whenever you go to harvest those plants, you can combine all 3 of those plant batches into one harvest batch. The only requirement is that the plants are the same strain. So again, if you have those 3 batches of 100 each of Dream Queen, you combine those all into one harvest batch at the end. Okay, so we've got our 18 plants here. Let's go ahead and harvest those. So we'll go to actions and then harvest filtered plants. So that's going to populate all the plant tags related to all the plant tags that we've selected. The harvest name is typically just going to be, you just want to make it unique and also indicating what the product actually is when it was done as well. So for instance, I usually recommend having the strain name and then the date, just so you can see, this is the strain that was harvested. Here's the date it was harvested, and see that in kind of one view. We've got the strain selected as well. We can select the drying location. So this is the room that the plants are going to be hung up in to dry. Select that. Leave the harvest date as today, and then the weight unit. So that could be pounds or grams, or depending on how you guys are tracking that. We can add in notes here as well. So the best way to do this, whenever you're creating a harvest, is you want to take the cumulative total, divide that by the number of plants you have, and then apply that that average plant weight to each plant. So in this case, we can say, 420 grams per plant. Once you click apply all, it's going to apply that weight, the average plant weight, to each one of those plants to give you the cumulative total. So in this case, 7,500 grams. Now, at this point, it's not required in Oklahoma to weigh each plant individually. That may change moving forward, but we haven't heard anything to confirm to confirm that. So this is going to be the best way to do it, just because you're not required to weigh each plant individually. Again, in California, it is required at this point per the regulations. So it may change in the future, but up until that point, you can just use this function and just do the average plant weight just to make it simpler. Okay. So once we have all that information entered, harvest name, drying location, and then those plant weights, we can go ahead and submit this harvest. Okay, so now that those have been harvested, we'll no longer see those plants in our flowering module, and we can go to our active harvest screen to actually view those plants, view the harvest, the total wet weight that we have. So let's take a look here. You can see our active harvests. And again, you can see why giving them unique names and clear names is important. So you may have multiple harvests of the same strain over the course of a few weeks. So this way we can see those individual harvests. So you can see our Dream Queen here at the top. I have a total of 7,560 grams, total of 18 plants with an average plant weight of 420 grams. Okay, so that's, again, kind of what I wanted to cover today is that basic setup, going through creating the plant batches, creating a new plant batch from mother plant, destroying plantings as needed, moving them into veg, printing labels, in the flowering, and then creating the harvest as well. That's kind of the stopping point right there. In our next webinar, we'll go through actually creating a package from this harvest and then taking that package through the sales process. So the sales process, allocation, and eventually transfer. So that's kind of the end for this webinar.